The examination hall stretched across 300 meters of polished obsidian floor, its ceiling lost somewhere in the artificial twilight above where holographic stars rotated in their eternal dance around the galactic core too. 147 students sat in neural interface, chairs arranged in concentric circles, each one representing the finest military minds their species could offer to thee. Sentinel Academy Commander Velshara stood at the center podium, her crystalline form refracting the ambient light into dancing patterns across the walls. She had administered this examination for 73 cycles, and each year the results disappointed her more than the last. The test itself was elegantly simple in design but devastatingly complex in execution. A simulation would present the students with a center containing multiple subjects, and they would have exactly 1 hour to identify which individual posed the greatest potential threat to galactic stability, not the most obviously dangerous, not the most physically powerful, but the genuine threat, the variable that could shift the balance of everything. The neural interfaces hummed to life, and the scenario materialized in each student's consciousness waiting room on a neutral station, generic and unremarkable. The kind of space where a dozen different species might gather before a diplomatic function or trade negotiation. 12 individuals occupied the space, each labeled clearly with their row and seat number. One contained a Korthax battle champion, its exoskeleton gleaming with ceremonial kill marks that numbered in the thousands. The creature stood 2.5 meters tall, its forearms ending in claws that could shred whole plating. 3 of the students selected it immediately, their threat assessments pinging complete within the first 30 seconds. Row 2 held a Drexian merchant, unremarkable except for the subtle shimmer of personal shielding that suggested wealth and paranoia in equal measure. Row 3 contained 3 beings, a Felix courier with cybernetic legs built for speed, an elderly Thane diplomat whose species was known for political manipulation, and a human female who appeared to be reading an actual physical book. The human had drawn seat 3 in row 3. Her designation read simply, Sarah Chen. Cultural exchange student. Earth row 4 was empty. Reserved spacing in the simulation. Row 5 contained the Zale Hivemind cluster, 4 bodies moving in perfect synchronization, their collective consciousness radiating outward in waves that made several species. Uncomfortable 20 students selected the Zale almost immediately. Their threat assessment matrices lit up with warnings about hive mind expansion patterns and historical conflicts with individualist species. Row 6 held a Cathari Jinn dancer, a member of a species that could modify their own biology in real time, making them unpredictable in any tactical scenario. SFN featured a Mechdrel, more machine than original biology, with weapon systems visible beneath translucent synthetic skin. 40 students chose the Mechdrel, citing its obvious combat capabilities and the species' history of mercenary work. Rows 8 through 12 contained various other species, traders, scientists, a religious pilgrim, a teenage Ixtal, still in their chrysalis phase. Commander Velshara watched the selections populate across her monitoring screen and felt the familiar weight of disappointment settle into her. Crystalline structure, not one student had selected. The human, not one the Korthax had received. 63 selections, the highest count, because students saw the obvious, the threat, and stopped thinking the Zale had received. 41 selections from students who feared collective consciousness more than individual danger. The Mechdrel had received 40 selections from those who mistook visible weapons for actual threat potential. The remaining students had scattered their choices across other candidates, each following their species-specific biases and cultural blind spots. 0 students had even flagged the human as a secondary concern. Sarah Chen sat in row 3 of the simulation, turning pages in her book with a slight smile on her face, completely ignored by every military strategist in the room. Velshara allowed the examination to continue for the full hour, watching as students refined their analyses and evases changed their selections. The Korthax count climbed to 70. The Zale dropped to 38 as some students reconsidered. 3 students switched to the Thane diplomat, Finally noticing the species' reputation for long-game political strategies, the human remained unselected when the time expired. Velshara stood, and the neural interfaces disengaged with a synchronized hum that echoed through the vast chamber. The students blinked, returning to full consciousness of their physical bodies. Confident in their assessments, "You have all failed," Velshara announced, her voice carrying across the hall without need for amplification. Silence that followed was absolute. Krennic's student in the third ring stood, their tentacles quivering with confusion. "Commander, I selected the Korthax based on combat effectiveness ratings, historical violence indices, and physical capability matrices, all primary threat indicators according to standard doctrine." "Sit down," Velshara said. Not unkindly, the student sat. "This is the third consecutive cycle where an entire class has failed this examination," the commander continued. "Third cycle, where our best and brightest have looked at a clear threat assessment scenario and chosen based on prejudice assumption and surface-level analysis rather than actual strategic thinking." She gestured, and the simulation reopened, this time projected as a hologram at the center of the hall, where everyone could observe. The waiting room materialized again. All 12 subjects visible. "I am going to do something I have never done before," Velshara said. "I am going to enter the simulation myself and demonstrate what you should have seen." Her avatar appeared in the waiting room, walking past the Korthax without a glance. Moving through the space with purpose, she stopped in front of row 3. She stopped in front of Sarah Chunda. Human looked up from her book, marking her place with one finger. "Hello," Sarah said pleasantly. "May I help you?" "I would like to ask you some questions," Velshara's avatar replied. "Of course." Sarah closed her book, and the students could now see its cover, a historical text about something called the 100 Years' War. "What are you reading?" Velshara asked. "Human history." Sarah replied. "This particular book covers one of our shorter conflicts. Barely a century of intermittent warfare between two kingdoms." Several students checked their chronological databases. Confusion spreading through the Hala century qualified as a short conflict. "Tell me about your homeworld," Velshara continued. "Earth is beautiful," Sarah said with genuine warmth. "Population around 8 billion. Diverse climates, rich ecosystem. We only achieved spaceflight about a century ago, but we've been making up for lost time." The monitoring systems in the examination hall began flashing alerts, saying billion individuals on a single planet. Several students frantically rechecked their data feeds, certain there must be an error. "What brings you to Sentinel Academy?" Velshara asked. "Cultural exchange." Sarah explained. "Humans are new to the galactic community, and we have a lot to learn. I'm studying comparative military history and strategic doctrine across different species." "And what have you learned so far?" Sarah smiled, and something in that expression made Velshara's crystalline structure resonate with recognition that everyone has patterns, the human said softly, "and patterns can be understood." Velshara ended the simulation. She turned to face her students, watching comprehension begin to dawn on the quickest minds in the room. "Now," she said, "we will discuss why the correct answer was row 3. Seat 3, and why every single one of you should be terrified that you missed it. The real examination was only just beginning." Commander Velshara's avatar remained frozen in the holographic display, standing before Sarah Chen, while 247 students struggled to understand why their comprehensive threat assessment protocols had led them so catastrophically wrong. "Want each of you to access your examination data packets," Velshara instructed. "Pull up the complete files on every subject in the simulation. Not just the summary cards you relied upon, but the full historical, biological, and cultural databases." The students complied, their neural interfaces flooding with information streams they had skimmed or ignored entirely during the actual test. "Start with the Korthax in row 1. Velshara continued. "How many of you selected this individual as the primary threat?" 70 hands, appendages, and consciousness flags raised across the hall. The Korthax Dominion has been a spacefaring civilization for 4,000 years. Velshara stated. They achieved faster-than-light travel 3 millennia ago, and have maintained stable borders for the last 2,000 years. Their battle champions are ceremonial positions, holdovers from an ancient warrior culture that has long since evolved into a peaceful, if proud, Society, she gestured at the hologram, where the Korthax stood in its impressive armor. This individual has thousands of kill marks. Yes, earned in ritual combat games that involve sophisticated holographic targeting. Not actual violence. The last time the Korthax engaged in genuine warfare was 600 years ago. A brief border skirmish that ended in a negotiated settlement after 3 weeks. The students who had selected the Korthax shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They looked dangerous. Velshara said flatly, "They are designed by evolution to look dangerous," which served them well when they were apex predators on their homeworld. Looking dangerous and being strategically dangerous are entirely different calculations. She moved on to the next popular choice, the Zale. Hive-Mine-40-1 of you selected this cluster as the primary threat. Explain your reasoning. Marthan's students spoke up, their voice synthesized through their environmental suit. Hive minds represent collective action without individual dissent. Commander, they can coordinate perfectly, share information instantaneously, and make decisions without the delays of consensus building. Correct. Velshara acknowledged. And how long have the Zale been part of the Galactic Council? 1,200 years, Commander. And in those 1,200 years, how many conflicts have they initiated? Silence, 0. Velshara answered her own question. Zale are conflict avoidant by nature, because any damage to one body is experienced by all. They feel pain collectively, which makes them extraordinarily motivated to pursue peaceful solutions. They are perhaps the least threatening species in the entire simulation from a strategic standpoint. She let that sink in before continuing the mech drill. Received 40 selections of species that has indeed worked as mercenaries, but always as hired contractors following established rules of engagement. They have never initiated conquest, never pursued expansion, never demonstrated strategic ambition beyond economic gain. Velshara's form brightened, light refracting more intensely through her crystalline structure, a sign that those who knew her species recognized as frustration. Every single one of you selected based on surface, appearance, cultural prejudice, or outdated threat models. You saw weapons and assumed danger. You saw collective consciousness and assumed expansionism. You saw physical power and assumed strategic threat. She turned back to the hologram, where Sarah Chen had returned to reading her book. Not one of you investigated the human. Thoroughly not one of you looked beyond the summary designation of cultural exchange student to examine what that actually meant. The monitoring screens throughout the hall shifted, displaying data that made several students physically recoil. Earth, Velshara began, is classified as a Class 12 death world for those of you who skipped your xenobiology courses. There are only 4 known Class 12 worlds in our entire galactic database. A Sethian student raised a claw. Commander, that cannot be correct. Class 12 designation requires multiple extreme environmental factors, including high gravity, dangerous atmospheric composition, extreme weather variability, and ecosystem saturation with lethal organisms. Your definition is accurate. Velshara confirmed Earth exhibits all of those characteristics. Gravity is 1.6 times galactic standard. Oxygen levels are 21% compared to the safe range of 8 to 12%. And the planet experiences regular catastrophic weather events including hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions. She pulled up imagery of Earth's ecosystem. The planet is saturated with predators, parasites, and pathogens that have driven an evolutionary arms race spanning billions of years. Humans evolved not as the strongest species on their world, but as the most adaptable, the most persistent, and the most strategically intelligent. The holographic display shifted to show human anatomy in comparison to other species. Observe the muscular structure optimized for endurance. Rather than burst speed, humans are persistence, predators who evolved to chase prey animals until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. They can run for hours in conditions that would kill most of us from heat exhaustion alone. Their skeletal structure is reinforced to handle impacts and stress that would shatter our bones. Their healing capability allows them to recover from injuries in days or weeks that would be permanent disabilities for most species. A Quellen student's color pattern shifted to indicate distress. Commander, if humans are this physically dangerous, why are they not classified as a restricted species? Because, Velshara said quietly, Their physical capabilities are not what makes them dangerous. She pulled up human historical data, and the timeline that appeared made the entire hall go silent. Humans achieved bronze metallurgy. Approximately 5,000 years ago, they achieved industrial revolution. 250 years ago, they split the atom. 130 years ago, they reached their own moon. 90 years ago, they achieved faster than light travel. 23 years ago, the progression was displayed visually, and the acceleration curve was almost vertical. For context, Velshara continued. The Korthax took 6,000 years to go from bronze to nuclear fission. The Zale took 4,000 years. My own species took 3,000 years. And we are considered a rapid development civilization. Humans compressed that entire progression into 5,000 years. With most of it happening in the last 3 centuries, she began playing archived footage that humans themselves had provided to the Galactic Council. During First Contact, the students watched cities rise and fall, watched empires expand and collapse, watched wars of staggering complexity and brutality. This is human history. Velshara narrated a species that competed against itself so viciously that it developed game theory, strategic deception, psychological warfare, and information control to levels unmatched in any galactic database. The footage showed human conflicts, trenches spanning continents, machines of war that defied belief, weapons that could end civilizations. They fought each other for thousands of years, developing increasingly sophisticated methods of violence, negotiation, and cooperation. They learned to wage total war and then learned to prevent it through mutually assured destruction. They created a situation so dangerous that they had to evolve past it or face extinction. The timeline showed the development of nuclear weapons, followed by a near-immediate global framework for arms control. They learned. Velshara said they adapted. They took the lessons from killing each other and applied them to not killing each other, and they did it in less than a century. She stopped the footage and turned to face her students now. She said, "Knowing all of this, knowing that Sarah Chen comes from a species that evolved on a planet that would kill most of you and ours, that developed from bronze to starships in 5 millennia, that learned to wage and prevent total war, does anyone want to change their threat assessment?" Every hand in the hall slowly raised. "Too late," Velshara said. "In a real scenario, you would already be compromised. The threat would already be integrated into your systems, your economies, your political structures. By the time you recognized what was happening, the variable would already have shifted." She gestured to Sarah Chen in the hologram, still reading peacefully in row 3. "The most dangerous threats do not announce themselves." Velshara concluded. "They sit quietly and wait for you to underestimate them." Commander Velshara expanded the holographic display until it dominated the entire examination hall. An Earth materialized above them in stunning detail, blue and green sphere wrapped in swirling white clouds that looked deceptively peaceful from orbit class 12 Death World. She repeated, letting the designation hang in the air. "Before we continue, I want to establish baseline understanding. How many of you have actually visited a Class 8 world or higher?" 3 students raised appendages from the entire assembly. "That tells me everything I need to know." Velshara said, "Most species in the Galactic Council evolved on Class 3 to Class 6 worlds, temperate, stable, with relatively benign ecosystems. You simply cannot comprehend what a Class 12 environment does to evolution." She zoomed the display into Earth's surface, showing a tropical rainforest. "This is considered one of Earth's more pleasant environments." Velshara stated the temperature averages 32 degrees Celsius with 90% humidity. It rains almost daily. The ecosystem contains approximately 430 species that can kill a human through venom, disease, or physical attack within a square kilometer. Several students accessed their environmental tolerance data and immediately registered alerts. A Fralian student spoke up, their voice carrying concern. "Commander, my species would experience respiratory failure in those conditions within 20 minutes. "Correct," Velshara confirmed. 73% of species in this hall would die from the atmospheric conditions alone before any predator or any pathogen reached them. Humans consider this environment suitable for vacation activities." She shifted the display to a desert, region, the Sahara Desert surface temperatures exceed 50 degrees Celsius during the day and drop below zero at night. Humans not only survive here, but have built civilizations in these conditions for thousands of years. Another shift showed a snow-covered mountain range, the Himalayas altitudes, where oxygen levels drop to 50% of sea level. Temperatures that remain below freezing for most of the year. Terrain that can kill through simple falls or avalanches. Humans climb these mountains for recreation. The display cycled through environments. Hurricanes that generated wind speeds exceeding 300 kilometers per hour. Tornadoes that could level entire settlements. Earthquakes that cracked the planet's crust. Volcanoes that turned day into night with ash clouds. This is the environment that shaped human evolution. Velshara continued. Every single one of these threats existed. Throughout their development as a species, they did not evolve in safety and then encounter danger. They evolved in constant danger and learned to thrive. Despite it, she pulled up comparative biological data. Human immune systems are aggressive to the weak point of being dangerous to the humans themselves. They produce inflammatory responses that can damage their own tissue because the alternative is allowing Earth's pathogens to gain any foothold whatsoever. They heal from wounds that would be fatal to most species. Broken bones knit back together in weeks, guts, and tears seal themselves in days. They have redundant systems for almost every vital function. A medical database appeared, showing human disease resistance. Earth has produced plagues that killed significant percentages of the human population, multiple times throughout their history, and each time, the survivors developed resistance, and the species continued. They have lived through smallpox, plague, influenza, and dozens of other pandemic-level diseases. They developed their own biological warfare as a result, and then created international treaties to ban it, because they understood exactly how dangerous they had become. Velshara shifted the presentation. 2. Human athletic capability. The human in row 3, Sarah Chen, has a resting heart rate of 60 beats per minute. Under stress, this can increase to over 200 beats per minute. She can sustain aerobic activity for hours, far longer than any comparable species her size. Her body can process lactic acid efficiently enough to prevent muscle failure during extended exertion. She has a cooling system based on perspiration that allows her to regulate temperature in conditions that would cause most species to overheat and die. The display showed human persistence hunting. Ancient footage of humans following prey across vast distances. Humans evolved to chase animals until the animals collapsed from heat exhaustion. They are not the fastest species, not the strongest, but they are relentless. They simply do not stop. A Krennic student raised a tentacle commander. These physical adaptations are impressive, but surely not unique.
Ow.
There are other species with similar capabilities. Name one that also developed nuclear weapons. Spaceflight and information technology within 5,000 years. Velshara challenged. The student had no answer. Physical capability alone does not make humans the threat they are, Velshara continued. It is the combination of physical resilience and cognitive acceleration that creates the danger. She pulled up human technological development timelines again, but this time with additional context. Humans went from their first powered flight to landing on their moon in 66 years. In that same time period, they developed radar, television, computers, nuclear power, satellites, and intercontinental ballistic missiles. They went from basic computers that filled entire rooms to devices that fit in their pockets and contained more processing power than the systems that guided their first spacecraft. This happened in 50 years. The acceleration curves were displayed across multiple technological domains, and every single one showed exponential growth. They developed the internet and connected their entire species in a single generation. They mapped their own genome. They created artificial intelligence. They began modifying their own genetics, and they did all of this while fighting wars, preventing wars, building and collapsing economies, and managing a population of 8 billion individuals. Velshara let that number stand alone for a moment. 8 billion, she repeated for context. The Korthax homeworld supports 2 billion individuals and is considered densely populated. Earth is the third planet in its star system, and the only one capable of supporting life. Yet humans have packed 8 billion of themselves onto its surface. They have optimized every available space for habitation or resource production. They farm approximately 11% of all land area and have domesticated hundreds of species for food. Labor and companionship. A Sethian student's claws clicked in agitation. Commander. That level of population density typically leads to resource wars and societal collapse. It has. Velshara confirmed multiple times throughout human history, each time they rebuilt, adapted their systems, and continued growing. They have proven capable of recovering from civilizational near-collapse repeatedly. She showed historical data of human population crashes and recoveries. The Black Death killed 1/3 of the European human population in the 14th century. The population had recovered and was growing again. The experience led to massive social and technological changes that accelerated their development. Humans use catastrophe as a learning opportunity. The display shifted to show human space exploration 23 years ago. Humans made first contact with the Galactic Council, but they had been observing us for 2 decades before that initial contact. This statement caused immediate reaction throughout the hall. 2 decades. Velshara emphasized they detected our communications, learned our languages, studied our cultures and power structures, and only revealed themselves when they had sufficient understanding to negotiate from a position of knowledge. They did not rush into contact. They observed, learned, and prepared. This is strategic thinking at a level that should terrify any military analyst. She zoomed back to the simulation. To Sarah Chen, sitting in row 3, this individual is 24 years old by human, reckoning she was born after humans achieved faster than light. Travel-Shay has grown up in a civilization that went from isolated homeworld to galactic participant in less than a generation. She reads books printed on paper because humans value their history and traditions even while racing into the future. She studies military history because humans understand that those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it. And she sits quietly in row 3, appearing completely harmless. While every threat assessment system in this academy fails to flag her as a concern, Velshara's crystalline form resonated with emphasis. Sarah Chen survived childhood on Earth. She has an immune, a system that has fought off diseases that would kill most species in this room. She has bones that can withstand impacts that would shatter ours. She has brain that developed in an environment of constant threat, assessment, and adaptation. She is already more dangerous than 90% of the individuals in that simulation simply by virtue of being human. But that is still not what makes her the correct answer to this examination. The students leaned forward, finally beginning to understand the depth of their failure. Physical capability is not strategic threat. Velshara stated what makes humans truly dangerous is not their bodies, or even their technology, is how they think, how they learn, and how they integrate. She prepared to show them exactly what that meant. Commander Velshara reactivated the simulation, and her avatar once again stood before Sarah Chen in row 3. But this time, the students watched with new understanding of what they were actually observing. I am going to ask Sarah Chen a specific question, Velshara announced to the class. I want you to observe not just what she says, but how she says it. Her avatar addressed the human directly. Sarah, during this examination, you were aware that you were being observed and analyzed by military students. Why did you not make your nature more apparent? Sarah looked up from her book with that same pleasant smile, and several students now recognized it for what it was. Deliberate expression carefully calibrated to appear non-threatening. You did not ask me to. Sarah replied simply, I was instructed to wait in this room, which I did. In making myself noticeable would have served no purpose. But surely you understood that appearing harmless might cause these students to underestimate you. Velshara pressed, yes. Sarah acknowledged that would be their error. Not mind the simplicity of that statement sent a chill through the assembled. Studens. Velshara's avatar gestured for Sarah too. Continue. Humans learn very early that drawing attention is not always advantageous. Sarah explained, "We call it reading the room. The ability to assess a social situation and adjust our behavior to achieve optimal outcomes. On Earth, this skill develops from childhood. We learn to match energy levels, mirror communication styles, present ourselves in ways that make others comfortable or uncomfortable, depending on what serves our interests." Quellen's students' color patterns shifted to query mode. "This sounds like systematic deception." Sarah tilted her head. "Considering humans would call it social intelligence, every species modifies their behavior based on context. Yes, you speak differently to superiors than to peers. You adjust your communication style based on your audience. Humans simply developed this capability to a very sophisticated level because we spent thousands of years in complex social hierarchies where reading intent and managing perception often meant the difference between survival and death." Velshara's avatar pulled up archived footage of human diplomatic negotiations, business meetings, and social interactions. "Observe," she instructed her students. The footage showed humans in various contexts, and the students could now see what they had missed before: the constant micro-adjustments in body language, tone, word choice, and emotional display. Humans negotiating a trade agreement mirrored each other's postures unconsciously. Building rapport through physical synchronization, humans in conflict maintained careful control of their facial expressions, revealing only what they chose to reveal. Humans in cooperation shifted seamlessly between different communication modes depending on who they were addressing. "This is not deception," Velshara explained. "This is adaptive communication operating at a level of sophistication that most species never developed because they never needed it. Humans are integration specialists. They learn new languages faster than almost any other species because they evolved in environments with hundreds of distinct language groups in close proximity. They adapt to new social structures rapidly because they have thousands of years of experience navigating complex hierarchies and shifting political landscapes." Sarah spoke again from within the simulation. "My species has a saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do." It means that the intelligent approach is to observe the local customs and adapt to them rather than imposing your own preferences. This is not weakness. It is strategic flexibility. Velshara pulled up humanity's first contact records, and the students saw something that had been documented but not understood. Humans observed the Galactic Council for 20 years before making contact, she stated. During that time, they learned 47 different galactic languages, studied the political structures of every major species, analyzed trade patterns, and developed comprehensive cultural profiles when they finally introduced themselves. They did so with prepared translations in every major language, with diplomatic protocols that respected each species' customs, and with trade proposals that had been optimized for mutual benefit. They arrived at the negotiating table knowing more about us than we knew about them. A Marthan student vocalized through their suit commander. "That level of preparation suggests they viewed first contact as a potentially hostile situation." "No," Velshara corrected, "it suggests they viewed first contact as a situation where being unprepared could lead to negative outcomes. Humans prepare for every possibility, not because they expect the worst, but because they have learned through painful experience that preparation prevents disaster." She showed footage of human space programs, the meticulous planning and redundant safety systems. Every human spacecraft has backup systems for the backup systems. Every mission is planned with multiple abort scenarios every astronaut trains for years before attempting what other species accomplish with months of preparation. This is not paranoia. This is the mindset of a species that evolved in an environment where lack of preparation meant death. Sarah closed her book and stood, the movement fluid and controlled. "May I demonstrate something, Commander?" she asked. Velshara's avatar gestured as Sensora walked across the simulated waiting room, and her gait changed subtly as she moved when approaching the Corthax. Her posture shifted to convey respect without submission. Her movement became more deliberate to avoid being perceived as threatening when passing the Zale cluster. She maintained slightly more distance, acknowledging their need for personal space as a hive mind when nodding to the Thane diplomat. Her gesture was precisely calibrated to match Thane diplomatic courtesy. Humans observe patterns, Sarah explained as she demonstrated. We watch how others move, communicate, and interact. We learn the unspoken rules of every social environment we enter, and we adapt our behavior to navigate those environments successfully. This is not manipulation. This is a survival strategy that became so ingrained in our evolution that we often do it unconsciously. She returned to her seat when I entered this simulation. I observed that everyone else was waiting quietly. So I waited quietly and noted that drawing attention seemed disadvantageous. So I chose a low-profile activity. Reading a physical book is unusual, enough to be memorable, but non-threatening enough to be dismissed. I made myself a footnote rather than a headline. Velshara addressed her students directly. This is strategic thinking at the highest level. Sarachan assessed the situation in seconds, made a decision about optimal behavior, and executed that strategy flawlessly. She did not need weapons or armor or obvious displays of power. She used the most effective tool available: your own assumptions and biases. The commander pulled up analysis of human conflicts throughout history. Humans have fought thousands of wars, and the victors are rarely the ones with the most powerful weapons. They're the ones with the best strategy, the most accurate intelligence, and the ability to make their opponents underestimate them until the decisive moment. Footage played of historical battles where smaller forces defeated larger ones through deception. Terrain advantage and psychological warfare. Sun Tzu, an ancient human military strategist, wrote that all warfare is based on deception. This philosophy permeates human strategic thinking across every domain. They do not fight fair, they fight to win, and they understand that the best victory is the one that never requires actual combat, because you have already won through positioning, intelligence, and strategic preparation. Sarah spoke once more, and this time her voice carried a weight that made every student pay attention. My species spent 10,000 years fighting ourselves because we had no one else to fight. Learned every possible way to wage war, prevent war, recover from war, and profit from war. We learned game theory by playing games with each other. We learned psychology by trying to understand our enemies. We learned economics by competing for resources across every environment on our planet. By the time we reached space, we had already mastered the art of competition and cooperation in ways that most species never experienced because they never had to. Velshara let those words settle across the hall. The Korthax looked dangerous, but had been peaceful for centuries. The Zale appear alien, but are fundamentally non-aggressive. The Mechdrel have weapons, but operate within established mercenary codes. Sarah Chen looks harmless, studies quietly, and integrates seamlessly into galactic society. And in 20 years, humans have gone from unknown species to essential trade partners with growing political influence. In another 20 years, they will likely control significant portions of galactic economy through simple competitive advantage. In 50 years, they could reshape galactic politics entirely, not through conquest, through integration, adaptation, and strategic positioning. Velshara's avatar stepped back from Sarah Chen. The most dangerous predator is not the one that roars, the commander stated. It is the one that waits patiently in tall grass, understanding that the prey will eventually come within range. Humans are persistent predators in every sense: physically, socially, economically, always, and strategically. They do not need to be the strongest or the fastest. They simply need to be patient, adaptable, and willing to wait for the right moment, and they are very, very good at waiting. Commander Velshara collapsed the simulation with a gesture, and the holographic waiting room dissolved into particles of light that faded into the examination. All's ambient glow. The 247 students sat in absolute silence, each one processing the magnitude of their analytical failure. The examination is concluded, Velshara announced. You have all failed not just this test, but the fundamental purpose of this academy. She let that statement hang in the air for a long moment. Sentinel Academy exists to train military analysts and strategists who can identify threats to galactic stability before those threats manifest into actual conflicts. You are meant to be the early warning system that prevents wars rather than the forces that fight them today. You demonstrated that you were completely unprepared for that responsibility, eh? Verlian student found the courage to speak commander with respect. The examination was designed to deceive. Usera Chen was deliberately presented as non-threatening correct. Velshara acknowledged. Just as every real strategic threat will present themselves as non-threatening until the moment they choose otherwise, did you expect a theoretical exam to include flashing warnings and helpful indicators? The student subsided. Properly chastened Velshar's crystalline form shifted, refracting light in patterns that her species used to convey deep concern. I have administered this examination 73 times, she stated in the first cycles. Approximately 30% of students identified the human as a primary or secondary threat over time. That percentage has decreased to 0. Do you understand what that means? A Krennic student tentatively raised a tentacle. It suggests that humans have successfully integrated into galactic society to the point where they are no longer perceived as outsiders. Precisely. Velshara confirmed 23 years ago, humans were unknown. They were foreign, exotic. Potentially dangerous analysts flagged them for additional scrutiny simply because they were new variables in established systems now. Humans are everywhere. They serve on trade vessels. They attend our academies. They participate in diplomatic functions. They run businesses. They have become so thoroughly integrated that you no longer see them as different. She pulled up statistical data showing human dispersal throughout galactic society. There are currently 412,000 humans living outside Earth across 27 different worlds and 143 orbital stations. They have established trade relationships with 63 species. They participate in 12 major galactic industries in 23 years. They went from zero presence to essential participants in galactic economy and society. The numbers displayed across the hall told a story of exponential expansion. Human corporations now handle 17% of all inner system. Engineers designed the new generation of fusion reactors being adopted across 14 species. Infrastructure human cultural products have become popular entertainment on 40 worlds. They have made themselves indispensable. Velshara shifted. The data to show economic trends. Human-operated businesses undercut established prices by an average of 12% while maintaining equivalent or superior quality. They do this through efficiency optimizations that other species had not. Considered human workers are willing to accept contracts in environments that most species find uncomfortable, expanding into economic niches that were previously unprofitable. Human traders negotiate deals that benefit both parties to a degree that makes them preferred partners, even when cheaper alternatives exist. Sethian student vocalized confusion commander. This sounds like humans are contributing positively to galactic society. Why would this be a threat? Because, Velshara replied, in 50 years, at current trajectory, humans will control enough economic infrastructure that any interruption to human participation would cause cascading failures across multiple sectors. She let that implication settle. They are not conquering through force. They are becoming essential through integration, and once you are essential, you have leveraged. The display shifted to show political trends. Humans currently serve in advisory roles to 17 different galactic governments. They provide consulting services for infrastructure development, economic policy, and strategic planning. They are teaching us their methods, and we are adopting those methods because they demonstrably work in 20 years. Human strategic thinking will be embedded in galactic institutions to the point where distinguishing between galactic policy and human influence will become impossible. Velshara brought up historical examples from the galactic database. Every major power shift in galactic history followed the same pattern. An emerging species integrates peacefully, provides value, becomes essential, and then leverages that position to reshape systems in their favor. The architects did this 4,000 years ago. Through technological superiority, the Krennic did this 2,000 years ago through financial systems. The Thane did this 1,000 years ago through diplomatic networks. Humans are doing it now through adaptive integration across every available vector. Simultaneously, she pulled up comparative timelines. The difference is speed. Architects took 600 years to achieve economic integration. The Krennic took 300 years. The Thane took 200 years. Humans achieved comparable integration in 23 years. The acceleration curve was nearly vertical. This is not sustainable expansion. This is exponential infiltration of every system they encounter. And they do it while appearing helpful. Friendly and non-threatening, Valshara dismissed the data displays and addressed her students directly. The examination was never about identifying the most dangerous individual in a waiting roomette, was about identifying which variable in a complex system has the greatest potential to alter that system's fundamental nature. The Korthax battle champion is powerful, but operates within known parameters. The Zale hive mind is unusual, but predictable. The Mechdrel has weapons, but follows established protocols. Sarah Shen represents a species that has demonstrated the ability to reshape entire planetary ecosystems, compress thousands of years of development into centuries, cover from near-extinction events, and adapt to literally any environment they encounter. She sits quietly in row 3, reading a book while her species rewrites the rules of galactic interaction around her. Valshara's form brightened to maximum refraction. You missed her because she wanted you to miss her. Hand, that should terrify you. Commander walked through the circular rows of students. I want each of you to access the Galactic Council's first contact records with humanity. Read the initial reports. Observe how human negotiators presented themselves during those early meetings. The students complied. Pulling up archived footage, humans appeared in the recordings dressed in formal attire that had been carefully researched to show respect without submission. They spoke in measured tones, using languages they had learned specifically for these negotiations. They offered trade agreements that provided value to the Council while establishing human mentoring. Economic presence. Notice, Valshara instructed, that humans never asked for permission to join galactic society. They demonstrated capability and waited for us to offer them membership. They positioned themselves as the solution to problems we did not know we had. Footage showed human engineers solving a critical infrastructure problem on a council station. Human medics treating a disease outbreak with techniques adapted from Earth medicine. Human traders opening profitable routes that had been considered unfeasible. They made themselves valuable. First, the political integration followed naturally. Valshara stopped at the center of the hall. Sarah Chen is here at this academy because humans understand that learning our systems is more valuable than opposing them. She studies our military history not to copy it, but to understand how we think when she returns to human space. She will carry that knowledge with her. She will share it with human strategic planners, and they will use it too. It's better integrate with our institutions. This is not aggressive. This is perhaps the most sophisticated form of strategic thinking possible. A Marthon student suit synthesizer crackled with realization. Commander, you are saying that humans are not the threat, they are the inevitability. No. Valshara corrected gently. I am saying that humans are the variable most likely to reshape galactic civilization. Whether that reshaping is a threat or an opportunity depends entirely on how we choose to engage with them. She pulled up one final image. Sarah Chen leaving the academy's main building. Joining a group of other human students, they walked together, laughing about something, sharing food from containers they had brought from home, peering for all the galaxy-like, ordinary young people, enjoying their education. The question, Valshara stated, is not whether humans will influence the future of galactic society. They already are. The question is whether we recognize that influence while we still have the option to shape how it develops. She turned to face her students one last time. You failed this examination because you looked for traditional threats: military power, aggressive expansion, obvious danger. You failed to recognize that the species most likely to change everything is the one that makes you comfortable with their presence. While they systematically integrate into every aspect of your chivalry,